Sometimes an empath's biggest mistake doesn't look like a mistake. It looks like kindness, like the ability to understand everyone around you, like a desire not to hurt, like a habit of making excuses even for those who time and again leave traces of their heavy footsteps in your soul. But then a strange moment arrives. You look at your life and can't understand why there's so much weariness inside, why freedom seems to be somewhere close, yet it always slips away. And then the first question arises. What if other people didn't build the cage? What if you created some of the bars yourself? Carl Jung said that a person doesn't become free by avoiding their own darkness. They become free when they begin to see it. For an empath, this is especially painful, because all their lives they've been taught to look at the feelings of others. But almost no one has taught them to look at their own wounds. This is where the story of a mistake begins, one that most empaths don't even notice. It hides behind beautiful words, behind noble intentions, behind the image of a good person, and so it remains invisible for many years. There's a trigger familiar to almost every empath. When someone gets upset because of you, at that moment, it's as if an ancient alarm is triggered inside. An urgent desire arises to fix the situation, to explain, to calm, to make everyone feel good again. At first glance, this looks like caring. But if you look deeper, you'll notice something strange. Freedom begins to disappear at precisely this moment, because you cease to belong to yourself. Your inner state becomes hostage to other people's emotions. And the more often this happens, the stronger the invisible chain becomes. Jung called this losing contact with one's own center, when a person lives not from within themselves, but through the reflections of others. For an empath, this is especially dangerous. They sense other people's moods so subtly that they gradually begin to confuse them with their own. Someone else's fear becomes their fear. Other people's guilt becomes their own. Other people's discontent becomes their anxiety. And one day, they no longer understand where other people end and they begin. And without this, it's impossible to feel true freedom. Many empaths think that freedom will come when the right people surround them, when toxic relationships disappear, when no one pressures or manipulates them anymore. But life shows otherwise. Even among kind people, internal chains can remain in place, because the source of unfreedom often lies not outside, but within. In the old, almost imperceptible belief, I am responsible for other people's feelings. It is this thought that becomes the silent jailer of the soul. This belief once helped them survive, perhaps even in childhood. Perhaps back then, there were people around whose moods changed unpredictably. And the little empath quickly learned to read the atmosphere, learned to recognize danger. I learned to adapt. It was a talent. But over time, talent turned into habit, and habit became destiny, until one day my soul began to whisper, I no longer want to live just for the peace of others. It's interesting that this is precisely where many get scared, because freedom seems unfamiliar. It seems selfish. It seems cold. It seems wrong. But it's just an old fear, the same fear that kept you trapped inside invisible walls for years. In fact, freedom doesn't make a person cruel. It makes them real. A true empath never stops feeling others. They stop losing themselves. There's a huge difference. They can hear someone else's pain, but they no longer have to dissolve in it. They can understand, but they don't have to save. They can love, but they don't have to sacrifice themselves for everyone they meet. And it is at this moment that inner strength begins to emerge. Quiet, profound, almost mystical. There is one question that can change everything. What happens if you stop being responsible for other people's emotions? Most people immediately feel anxious, as if something terrible is about to happen, as if the world is about to collapse. But the truth is surprising. The world continues to exist. People continue to live their lives. And for the first time, space appears within to breathe. For one's own desires, for one's own soul. Freedom does not come when all limitations disappear. It comes when inner slavery disappears. When you no longer have to earn the right to be yourself. When you no longer have to constantly prove your kindness. When you no longer have to buy love with self-sacrifice. That's when an empath begins to see the world differently, as if an ancient veil falls from their eyes. But the most amazing discovery lies ahead, because the error that prevents freedom isn't just about other people. It's about something much deeper. It's about the part of the personality that Jung called the shadow. And until an empath meets this part within themselves, freedom will remain just a beautiful dream, which means the real story is just beginning. A shadow rarely comes in the form of something scary. More often, it comes in the form of qualities a person forbids themselves to display. For an empath, one of these shadows is the right to say no, a simple, short word, but how much anxiety it can stir from the depths of the soul. Because with this word, old fears arise. Fear of disappointment, fear of losing love, fear of appearing bad. And as long as an empath fears their own no, their freedom remains conditional. They can move, they can choose, they can change circumstances, but inside, they continue to live under the power of others' expectations. That's why a mistake is so invisible. It disguises itself as kindness, although in reality, it feeds on fear. And one day, an understanding comes that changes everything. You don't help because you want to, because you fear the consequences of rejection. At this moment, something inside begins to awaken, because the soul always senses the difference between love and fear. They may look the same on the outside, but inside, they create completely different destinies. Love expands a person. Fear gradually compresses their life to the size of a cage. And many empaths live in this cage for years, considering it their destiny. They feel obligated to be a light for everyone, obligated to understand everyone, obligated to forgive everyone. But does the sun ask permission before setting below the horizon? Does the ocean feel guilty for its ebb and flow? Nature feels no shame for its naturalness. Only humans have learned to be ashamed of themselves, and empaths especially often bear this burden. They become so accustomed to being comfortable that they forget what their own voice sounds like. At first, it's almost imperceptible. Then he stops talking about his desires. Then he stops noticing them altogether. And one day, he catches himself thinking he's living someone else's life. On the outside, everything may look right, but inside, a feeling of emptiness grows, as if the soul has long since moved on, while the personality continues to follow the same old path. This is where another important insight emerges. Freedom cannot be found, cannot be earned, cannot be earned. You can only stop giving it to others. Every time you betray your feelings for someone else's approval, you pay with part of your freedom. Every time you choose someone else's comfort over your own truth, the price becomes even higher. Over time, these small transactions accumulate, and a person no longer remembers exactly where they lost themselves. But the soul remembers. It always remembers. This is precisely why some empaths feel an inexplicable longing. Even when everything appears fine, even when people are around, even when there are no obvious problems. It's not a longing for someone else. It's a longing for the real you, for that part of yourself that has been in exile for too long. Jung wrote that a person becomes whole not when they become perfect, but when they accept all parts of their nature. This is a particularly important lesson for an empath, because they are used to accepting everyone around them, except themselves. They allow others to be imperfect, but demand perfection from themselves. They allow others to make mistakes, but they don't forgive their own mistakes. They allow others to be angry, but they forbid themselves from even feeling irritated. This is how an internal split arises. This is one of the main causes of unfreedom. As long as a person is at war with themselves, they cannot be free. As long as he rejects part of his nature, he remains divided. And a divided soul always expends too much energy. Therefore, true freedom begins unexpectedly. Not with control, not with struggle, not with self-improvement. It begins with permission. Permission to be alive. Permission to sometimes make mistakes. Permission to displease everyone. Permission to have boundaries. Permission to choose yourself without guilt. And at that moment, something amazing happens. The world doesn't collapse. People don't disappear. The sky doesn't fall. Only the old illusion that your value depends on how useful you are to others disappears. This is one of the most difficult illusions for an empath, because it often becomes part of the personality, part of the image, part of self-esteem. But true value never comes from sacrifice. It exists from the very beginning, before achievement, before recognition, before gratitude, before others' approval. And the more deeply an empath begins to understand this, the easier their breathing becomes. It's as if heavy chains are gradually falling from their soul, as if years of tension are beginning to dissolve. But the most difficult stage remains, because the old mistake isn't based solely on fear. It's based on a deep inner dependence on others' approval. And it's precisely this dependence that proves to be the last door to be opened on the path to true freedom. Addiction to recognition rarely feels like an addiction. It doesn't feel like chains. It doesn't feel like a prison. On the contrary, it often feels like hope. Hope to finally hear the words you once so desperately needed. Hope to feel your value through someone else's gaze. Hope to one day earn that very acceptance that feels like the key to all doors. But there's a trap here, because a person who seeks external validation of their worth inevitably gives others the right to define their inner reality. Today they're loved, they feel significant. Tomorrow they're misunderstood, and the ground beneath their feet shifts. Thus, freedom becomes a pendulum, swung by the opinions of others. And many empaths live exactly this way, without even realizing it. They sense other people's moods faster than their own state. They notice others' approval faster than the voice of their soul. It's as if they've spent their entire lives looking in the mirror, trying to see themselves, but the mirror is in the hands of others. And the longer this search continues, the more distant the true inner home becomes. One day comes a moment when an empath begins to ask themselves a question. A very quiet question, almost a whisper. Who am I if no one is judging me now? No one is praising me. No one is judging me. No one is comparing me. No one is expecting anything. Who am I then? It is this question that opens a door that cannot be opened from the outside. Because behind it lies not a new version of yourself, not an ideal image, not spiritual perfection. Behind it lies authenticity, that part of you that existed before all your fears, before all your masks, before the need to conform, before the endless attempts to earn love. And when a person first touches this part of themselves, a strange sensation occurs, as if they are remembering someone long forgotten, as if, after many years of wandering, they are returning home, to a place where there is no need to play roles, where you don't have to be a savior, where you don't have to constantly earn your place in the sun. There, peace appears, not loud happiness, not rapture, but peace, deep and lasting, the kind that doesn't depend on circumstances. And then the empath begins to notice amazing things. They no longer rush to save everyone they meet, but their kindness never disappears. They no longer dissolve in other people's problems, but their ability to feel becomes even deeper. They no longer sacrifice themselves, but their love becomes purer, because now it's born not from the fear of losing someone, but from inner abundance, from freedom, from integrity. It's here that the mistake becomes clear. It was never connected only to other people. It was connected to trying to find their value where it couldn't be found, in other people's reactions, in other people's recognition, in others' approval, in others' expectations. But freedom begins the moment the search ends. When you stop asking the world if you have the right to be yourself. When you stop asking permission to live your life. When you stop explaining your soul to everyone you meet. And then a true miracle happens. Not mystical, not supernatural, but very human. You return to yourself, to the person you were originally intended to be. And suddenly it becomes clear that freedom was never somewhere far away. It wasn't waiting behind a new door. It wasn't hiding in future achievements. It wasn't dependent on the right people. It was quietly waiting inside all this time, under layers of fears, under layers of others' expectations, under layers of old beliefs. And when the last of these layers begin to dissolve, the soul seems to spread its wings, not to fly away from the world, but to truly live in it for the first time, calmly, consciously, without the need to constantly prove anything. And if you recognize yourself in these words today, perhaps it's no coincidence. Perhaps your soul has long since grown tired of carrying a burden that never belonged to it. Perhaps it's already whispering to you what once seemed impossible to hear, that you don't have to save everyone. You don't have to be convenient. You don't have to earn the right to love. You don't have to lose yourself for the sake of acceptance. Because the true freedom of an empath begins precisely where the fear of being yourself ends. And perhaps your path to this freedom begins right now, with one honest look within, with one courageous choice, with one quiet decision to no longer betray your own soul. And it will do the rest itself. You could add a soft ending like this: what thought from this video resonated with you most? Share it in the comments. Perhaps your experience will help someone else gain an important insight about themselves. If you're interested in empathy, depth psychology, and inner transformation, subscribe to the channel. Many more discoveries await us that will help us better understand ourselves and our path.